Hey guys, what's up? Force here from Force StarCraft 2 Strategy. Going to be bringing you a Protoss strategy today. Now in this particular replay, our Protoss player is Saki, and our Terran opponent is Maro. Now again, we're going to be looking at a Protoss strategy. More specifically, we're going to be looking at opening with that 2 Warp Gate Robo build. Very strong against Terran players, allows you to have a lot of options, allows you to go into heavy Immortals if your opponent has heavy Marauders, and then obviously using those 2 warp gates to warp in gateway units is very strong as well. But most importantly, what we're going to be looking at is that option and the ability to transition into getting Colossi. If your opponent is going for this heavy Marine Marauder build, Colossi does very well against them. Essentially what you would look to do is keep the Colossi back, away from any Vikings and away from any sniping that any of the Marines and Marauders can do, and just use the range and the strength of the Colossi to take out that the unit composition of that Marine Marauder build. As you can see here, we're going to be moving into our Terran player's base, Terran opponent's base, trying to get some scouting information. Also doing some of the ever-annoying probe harass that I always rage about because it's so frustrating to deal with as a Terran player. But yeah, just get some scouting information. You can stay in your opponent's base until that threat comes out, which in this case would be the Marine. No reason to leave. Try to get as much intel as you can and figure out exactly what they're doing. Now back to our base here. So we're starting off with a pretty standard build with that 9 Pylon, followed up by the 13 Gateway. You're going to be following that up with the 15 Assimilator as well. So again, we're going to be opening with that standard build, that 2 Warp Gate and Robotics Facility. And like I said, that really opens up the best options for you against a Terran player. You can of course go into a 3 Warp Gate if you work on your econ and try to pump out a lot of probes, and then also that ability to transition into getting a Robotics Bay and getting Colossus on the board can be very strong. This is obviously going to be based on what your opponent does. Like any good strategies in your arsenal, you really need to be able to respond to your opponent. So as you can see, as soon as this gateway comes in, they're going to be dropping this Cybernetics Core. That is going down at 18 supply. Once that comes up, first thing we're going to want to do is research that Warp Gate research. So as you can see, we had left our opponent's base. That was because the threat of the Marine had come out, and basically a Marine on the board means you're going to lose your probe. So obviously you don't want to lose your probe, not at this point at least, and you want to go ahead and pull them out of your base. What you're going to be seeing us do here though is keeping out of the base until a minute or 2 more, and then trying to sneak in and try to get additional scouting information. Before we have that option of the observer, if you can sneak in a probe a few minutes into the game, it's going to give you a good idea of what your opponent's going for. Basically you're looking for any tech buildings they have, as well as what type and how many production buildings they have. So if they've got a couple factories, or if they have 2 or 3 barracks, or if they have a starport, that's really going to be vital to you. As you can see, the first thing we're going to be getting out for a unit here is the Stalker, very necessary against Terran to fend off the possibility of early Reapers. Also, we have the second Assimilator down, and we are now dropping our Robotics Facility. So again, we're going to be going for that 2 Warp Gate Robotics Facility build. As you can see, that Warp Gate research is coming in right now. Now this is what I mentioned earlier, moving in a few minutes into the game to get some secondary scouting information before you have an observer. And as you can see, with that we were able to see this 3 barracks build. So at this point we can fully expect a Marine Marauder heavy army from our Terran opponent. Now because of this, we are going to want to get this sentry out. What this is going to allow us to do is protect ourselves with force fields, protect ourselves from an early push, a 50 food push, or basically a push when the Terran player has amassed a decent sized army and has that stim pack fully researched. That's what a lot of Terran players look to do because it is very strong. But honestly, you can almost fully negate this with the sentry. Getting it nice and early too will allow it to save up some energy for plenty of force fields. As you can see here, our second gateway is coming in. Now that the Robotics Facility is in, the first thing you're going to want to do is get an observer out on the board. This is going to allow you to get that great intel, see exactly what your opponent's doing, and here you can see that Warp Gate research is just finishing right now. So for specific times, we started getting that Warp Gate research basically as soon as that Cybernetics Core finished building. That was at 24 supply. That Robotics Facility started building at 26 supply, and our second gateway we started getting at 29 supply. Now that is all in, we can turn our gateways into Warp Gates. Also going to be coming out with this 3rd gateway here. This is going down at 29 supply, and going to be dropping this Robotics Bay, and that went down at 36 supply. So yeah, we started out with that 2-gate robo. We saw that our Terran opponent was going for this 3 racks build, and from that point we decided to go into getting Colossi. Being able to get Colossi, like I said earlier, is going to be very strong. Now this is the type of push that I say can be very dangerous early in the game. Basically, like I said, as you can see here, a Terran player does have stim pack, and that's essentially when they look to move out. It's what's known as a timing push, and it's moving out when you have a certain upgrade or a certain unit that's going to do very well against your opponent. In this particular build for the Terran player, what they do is they push out when they have a sizable force of Marines and Marauders, and when that stim pack is finished researching, because having that stim pack puts them at an advantage, and it can be very dangerous for you. Basically, you are going to almost rely at this point in the game on force field, and that is what's going to keep you alive, so just be well aware of that. Obviously, this is going to be much more dangerous on any maps that have a very large ramp, but fortunately, most, if not all, but most of the 1v1 maps in the ladder system have a sized ramp that you can just use one force field to block someone out with. So something to keep in mind. Pushing our ranged units here on the edge to allow for some sniping while they try to move up our ramp. Not a bad idea to do the same at this location as well. I think the only difference here is that at this location you are vulnerable to snipes from this direction, whereas right here pretty much the only units that can hit you are in this vicinity. Definitely a much smaller radius here as opposed to all around this ridge here, so that would be the reason behind placing units here as opposed to here. So now, as you can see, we do have our 3 warp gates in, and we are going to be getting this Colossi out on the board. We did start out with this Immortal simply because that push was coming from our Terran opponent. Had that push not come, had they been in their base at that point, what we would have done is we would have just gone straight to the Colossi, because of course, you know, we did get this Robotics Bay. We're going to obviously put it to use. So like I said, Colossi, very, very, very strong against Marine Marauder. The thing is, it's susceptible to a snipe from Marines and Marauders. Basically, they'll stem up, they'll push in, and they'll try to snipe it real down quick. It's also susceptible to Vikings, and you can fully expect to see a Starport and Vikings from a opponent who knows you're going for this Robotics Bay. Now, what happened here was the Terran opponent did scan our base. He saw that Robotics Bay, so he knows Colossi are coming. He planned accordingly with Vikings, and what you're going to want to do is just try to keep them back from that Viking fire, or if you want to push forward to try to pull them back like you saw Saki do here, what you're going to want to do is use your Stalkers specifically to target fire those Vikings. That is going to allow you to take them out before they can actually snipe down that Colossi. Especially at this point in the game, with your opponent going for a 3 racks build, they're not going to have enough Vikings on the board once you have your first Colossi out to take it down efficiently. And that's essentially what you want to do. If you can push out, if you can fend off that early push from a 3 barracks build with Marines Marauders coupled with that stim pack ability, if you can fend that off with force fields and then push out as soon as your first Colossi is on the board, you're going to do very well. Just, you know, make sure that you do have forward pylons so that you can warp in reinforcement units, and then make sure you keep building out of your robotics facility here. Now, we're building, and we did get that Immortal out of that Robotics Facility, and then going to be following that up with a Colossi as well, as soon as we have those resources. And if you stay aggressive in this push, again, moving out with your first Colossi, as you can see in that engagement that took place, took out almost all of his forces, primarily with the Colossi. Just the damage is so strong against those lighter units. Obviously not as effective versus Marauders, but very, very effective versus the Marines, and it takes out the Marines so quickly that it can do well against Marauders after that point. But staying aggressive with this push, continuously warping in units and producing out of your robotics facility, you can easily take out a Terran opponent who's going for this 3 barracks build. So we're going to go ahead and go over that build order one time real quick. It started out with that 9 Pylon and followed it up with a 13 Gateway and a 15 Assimilator. Pretty standard in terms of openings. As soon as that first gateway finished, we got our Cybernetics Core at 18 supply, at 20 supplies when that second Assimilator came down, 24 once that Cybernetics Core was in, started getting that Warp Gate research, and 26 immediately we just went Gateway, Cybernetics Core into Robotics Facility, and that came down at 26 supply. Second Gateway came down at 29 supply, and then once that Warp Gate research has been, turn these into Warp Gates to get some early defensive, get some units on the board to fend off an early push. 36 supplies when we dropped our Robotics Bay, and then at 39 we got that third Gateway. So ultimately what we saw here was that 3 Warp Gate and that Robotics Facility with Robo Bay build, allowing us to get Colossi on the board and allowing us to push out with a heavy mix of Gateway units. So once again, guys, this has been for StarCraft 2 Strategy. If you guys like our videos and you like what we're doing here, please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. And I mean, that's really the key thing to note here in expansion. Expanding can be dangerous if your opponent is prepared to push out when you expand. Because those 400 minerals that you've dumped in that command center, It's not. You instead lose that in army, whereas your opponent has that in army.